The following is an interview given by His Holiness Jayapataka Swami Maharaj on September 24th, 1984 at New Panihati Dham in Atlanta, Georgia, USA. The interview was about Srila Prabhupada and Nectar.
Lord Sinha, like that there was. That's where all the totally Indian gentlemen who become English nobles, as for English knights or whatever, and where all the English people would stay. So he used to tell us how he would drive through there on his bicycle. He'd go through and look at the houses when he was a boy. That before that, Srila Prabhupada was saying that normally that area, it was like an exclusive area where only the really elite people would stay. So he used to go through on his bicycle. He said, "No, we have our temple here. It's nice." He'd sometimes make a joke, staying in the side quarter. Called the English people were called Sahib. Then Srila Prabhupada also told us that when he was a boy, that they would, sometime when they come to the Maidan, in the center of Calcutta, like in New York, there's Central Park. In the center of Calcutta, there's a big Maidan, or a big, like a park. It's all grass. And that park is under the control of Fort William, which is the army base. But it's a very beautiful, very big park. It must be about several miles long by 2 miles or 3 miles wide. It's quite large, at least 20-30 city blocks long. It goes right from the side of the Ganges to what's now known as, it's known as the Charangi Road. Now it's known as something else. So along that stretch, Prabhupada said sometime his father would have him walk to save the tram fare, which used to be 5 paisa. So then they'd walk. And he remember walking along the Maidan as a child with his father. And he also told us that at that time there was King George. Actually, it came because we were following Chaturmas one year. Bhavananda Maharaj, myself, Achyutananda Swami and Gagamuni Swami. The 4 of us were following Chaturmas, so we were just eating once a day. We were doing the austerities, chanting 64 rounds. So we also let our hair and beard grow. So then he saw Bhavananda and he said, "You look just like King George." And then, everyone laughed like that. He said, "No," he said, "I have seen." And then he went on to explain that when he was in those stories are supposed to be the humorous ones, or they can be the serious ones. Sure.
About 2 years ago, we were out in London. I saw this on the airport with Bhagavad, and when we came to a night street, which is kind of a shopping area, we turned to a servant who had never been in London before, and he said that Srila Prabhupada said that Calcutta used to be like this in the old days. And I was wondering if we can recall anything that Srila Prabhupada said about his childhood, that he was very, very little, and stories that Prabhupada said about his childhood in Calcutta.
Our temple in Calcutta is on 3 Albert Road at the Queen Victoria Square. And Prabhupada said that is the part of Calcutta that when he was a boy was known as the side quarter, or the area where the British used to stay. In fact, the owner of that house used to be a knight. He was knighted by the King of England. And down the road is Sir Lord Sinha, or Lord Sinha Road. There's some Lord Sinha. Like that there was. That's where all the Indian gentlemen who become English nobles, or English knights or whatever, and where all the English people would stay. So he used to tell us how he would drive through there on his bicycle. He'd go through and look at the houses when he was a boy. Before that, Srila Prabhupada was saying that normally that area, it was like an exclusive area where only the very elite people would stay. So he used to go through on his bicycle. He said, now we have our temple here. It's nice. He'd sometimes make a joke. He's staying in the side quarter. Call the English people were called side. Then Srila Prabhupada also told us that when he was a boy, that they would, sometime when they come to the Maidan, in the center of Calcutta, like in New York, there's Central Park. In the center of Calcutta, there's a big Maidan, or a big, like a park. There's all grass. And that park is under the control of Fort William, which is the army base. But it's a very beautiful, very big park. It must be about several miles long by 2 miles or 3 miles wide. It's quite large, at least 20-30 city blocks long. Goes right from the side of the Ganges to what's now known as it's known as the Charangi Road. Now it's known as something else. So along that stretch, Prabhupada said sometime his father would have him walk to save the tram fare, which used to be 5 paisa. Then they'd walk. And you remember walking along the Maidan as a child with his father. And he also told us that at that time there was King George. Actually, it came because we were following Chaturmas one year. Bhavananda Maharaj, myself, Achyutananda Swami and Gargamuni Swami. The 4 of us were following Chaturmas, so we were just eating once a day. We were doing the austerities, chanting 64 rounds. So we also let our hair and beard grow. So then he saw Bhavananda and he said, "You look just like King George." And then, everyone laughed like that. He said, "No," he said, "I have seen." And then he went on to explain that when he was in school, at that time King George came, I don't forget what number, King George V or something. The 5th? He came to India, went by ship and came all the way to India. And that time, their capital was in Calcutta, I still believe. We're still in Calcutta, I believe. So when he came there, they had all the school children line up alongside the road. And then he remembers that he saw, King George go by in his limousine, open air, and everyone was cheering and everything. As a schoolboy. So then he says, "I've seen him, just like Bhavananda Maharaj." And then he said that at that occasion they also gave a box lunch to all the children at school. Samosa, some sweets. Everyone got a little box to commemorate the arrival of King George V to Calcutta. If you see the old pictures of Calcutta, in Calcutta, one time Prabhupada went to see the Victoria Memorial. We went with him. And there they have the pictures of Calcutta as it was in the 1800s. And the same buildings are still there. A lot of them. Not all of them. But, at that time they were very stately. I mean, even now they're a little bit run down, but that time they were very stately buildings, and it was very well maintained. And they had all the horses and buggies and everything. So, quite thriving place. No, in Calcutta, they constructed a memorial for Queen Victoria, calling it the Victoria Memorial, and that's in the middle of that Maidan in Calcutta. It's 170 feet high, solid marble. Something like the Taj Mahal, only not quite so big or exclusive. See, regarding Calcutta, those are the main things I can remember that Prabhupada said. One thing that he said one day, he was giving class in Calcutta and he told the devotees in Calcutta, he said that I don't know how you're doing it, that how you're able to remain here in Calcutta. This is all with Krishna's mercy, because even I find it difficult, even I can't remain here. I have to travel, something like that. He made a little joke out of it. But then he said, because this is my birthplace city, and you're here, you're getting 10,000 times the credit for doing devotional service here than anywhere else. Than if you're back in your own country. And then, he said that even I can't remain here, but you're taking this austerity. Because Calcutta is very crowded now, it's quite a change for someone from the West. And he was very moved. He was very thankful that the devotees were taking that austerity of remaining in Calcutta, Bengal, and helping him to revitalize the Sankirtan movement in its original place. Then in Calcutta, the first thing that happened, Prabhupada sent Chutananda Swami was in Calcutta, and Srila Prabhupada, I had started the Toronto Center, and then Jagadish Das Adhikari had come up, and we mutually decided that he could be the president. And I wrote Prabhupada if he had another service, because I'd already started that temple, it was going nicely, there was the president, so I could go and open a new temple, or I could do anything he wanted, or I could stay there, whatever he wanted. He wrote back and said, I want you to go to India, to Calcutta. Please come and see me. So then I flew to Los Angeles to get instruction from Srila Prabhupada. At that time, Srila Prabhupada, he called me in his room and then he read to me some of the letters from Achyutananda Das Brahmachari. And he said that he has a place, so you can go. And then by the time I reached there, that's what he said in his letter. But come and explain. In the meantime, another letter came from Achyutananda Swami, Das Brahmachari, at that time, that he was still staying in the Gaudiya Math in Satish Mukherjee Avenue in Bhawanipur, Calcutta, the southern part of Calcutta. And then Prabhupada said that I don't want you to go until we have our own place. It was very cryptic. I mean, he said, I'll explain everything to you, but just before you go. He didn't want, until I was just ready to go, he didn't want to explain everything. And I had 2-3 meetings with Prabhupada in his quarters in Los Angeles. And then I remember in the second meeting, he read this letter. Something about something that his godbrothers had said or something. And I remember his servant was Devananda Das. Maybe it was a Swami, I'm not sure at that time. I don't think so. So Devananda, he said that, I think that your godbrothers are envious. And then it struck me funny, being a very simple, just being here in the West, it seemed very unusual to me that how could a godbrother be envious or something like that. And then, sure enough, Prabhupada blasted him and said that they're my godbrothers. You have no right to question them or criticize them. They're my godbrothers. And that, you have no right. And then I thought, yes, he was confirmed. He was off by saying that, because it sounded unusual to me. And then, Prabhupada said, I'm not going to send you to India now because they don't have their own place. Until they have their own place. So at that time, Bhagavan Maharaj Bhagavan Das Adhikari was going from Detroit to open up a center in Chicago. So then Prabhupada said I could go to Chicago and help him open that center. And then he would call me when it was time to go to India. So then we had that historical ride with Rupanuga Prabhu where the car didn't stay on the road near Albuquerque, New Mexico. But anyway, somehow I reached Chicago. And then Prabhupada sent me a telegram, please call. So I phoned Srila Prabhupada up. And I got the message that you go immediately to India, to Calcutta. They have their own place. You don't have to come back and get any information from Prabhupada. It's all right. Gargamuni gave me the message. So then I never got the briefing that Prabhupada said he was going to give me, what to watch out for, So, because Gargamuni, I don't think he didn't want to spend the money or something to send me back to Los Angeles. Frugal temple president. Conserving his finance. Anyway, Srila Prabhupada had a fund and he sent me from his own fund money to go to India. I raised a little more. So finally I got to Calcutta. And unfortunately we didn't have a separate residence as Srila Prabhupada had wanted. We were still staying in this Gaudiya Mutt, in the temple of Prabhupada's godbrother, Madhav Maharaj, Bhakti Daita Madhav Maharaj. And they treated me very nicely. I stayed there for 2 months. But Prabhupada kept writing us letters, furious, that immediately you have to get another place. Do daily Harinam, and immediately get another place and move out of there and have your own place. As soon as you have your own place, I'm coming. And then Prabhupada flew to Japan, and he kept writing from there, saying, so finally we found a place in Lakeview Road, something like that, near Rashbihari Avenue in South Calcutta. And it was a very nice house, built by a doctor. It was a 3-4 story house, and it was brand new. So he said, if a sadhus live in my house, you can stay there free 6 months. If, saintly Krishna conscious devotees stay there, then my house will be blessed. So you can stay there. So he gave us free of rent. Actually, for the first year and a half in Calcutta, I didn't pay any rent. People always gave us houses free, which is probably historic. Neither did we pay for any food to speak of. Most of it was donated. So when we had a new place, we telexed Prabhupada, and he said that he would be coming. And so prepare for his arrival, so I visited all the newspapers. There was just Achyutananda Das and myself. Achyutananda Das went to all of the godbrothers of Prabhupada to invite them to come and meet him at the airport. So he told me that he couldn't get anyone, no one would agree to come. So that's very unusual. Then I also invited 1 or 2, and I invited one Maharaj on the stairs of one temple. He said, yes, I'll go and greet my godbrother. Why not? And then some Grihastha my peer, Grihastha, disciple of one of Prabhupada's godbrothers, came up to him and said, "You can't go. He's your junior sannyasi. He took sannyas after you did, by 5 years. You can't go and greet him." So then, he was all intimidated by Soisava. So we couldn't actually get any of Prabhupada's godbrothers to go to the airport. It was unusual for us. I couldn't understand it. I'd always noticed the difference that when Prabhupada spoke, it seemed to be just earth-shattering and just immediately penetrate the heart. And when I'd hear his godbrothers speak, it was very interesting, and I could feel like a little tingle, like a little something, but it was just never the same. Never had that same overwhelming presence of the spiritual world as I would experience. That was my own subjective experience. But this was completely bewildering to me. So then we all went to the airport to meet Prabhupada. We had truckloads of Harinam Kirtan groups. We had newspapermen. The colonel who was in charge of that Fort William, he was in charge of the reception, so he arranged that Prabhupada didn't have to go through immigration or customs. They picked him up right from the airplane by a car, drove him to the VIP lounge, where he gave a press conference, because, returning celebrity, returning ambassador of Indian culture, they gave him the royal reception. All the big dignitaries came and people greeted him, and then we did a kirtan and reception. But Prabhupada looked around and saw that there were some of his disciples, godbrothers, disciples, but no godbrother was present. And one of the godbrothers had, if you don't know the name later, I'll tell you, but I'll just leave it out now for the sake. One of the godbrothers had invited that we'll give a reception for Prabhupada in our temple. And we'll have a feast ready. He should drive right up to our temple and we'll give him a reception here. It sounded like a very nice thing. But the godbrothers themselves didn't come to meet Prabhupada at the airport. They sent a disciple. So then we told it to Prabhupada. Prabhupada looked very stern. We had a big American car for him to ride in. And then behind we had all these trucks of kirtan devotees. So we were going to have like a procession into the town. But Prabhupada jumped into the car and Srila Bhaktipada was with Prabhupada, if I'm correct. I think Bhaktipada was with him. Yeah. And somehow Bhaktipada just took the steering wheel and Prabhupada said, go. And I was arranging with the press and everything, and next thing I know, Bhaktipada was behind the steering wheel and they're ready to take off. I didn't even know, so I had to just, Prabhupada, I had to just run and jump, get into the car at the last minute. And so then I told this to Srila Prabhupada, he said, we will not go there. Take us directly to our house. I said, very, couldn't understand, the intricacies. And Prabhupada was just very silent, very stern. And I said, well, we have this kirtan part, but he was just like very, very grave at that time. I never saw Prabhupada so intense. Up to that point, as I had seen then, it was a new experience. So then we drove him right straight to the Lake Road house. He liked the house. It was all brand new. We had a little room set up for him with an attached bath and everything. And then Prabhupada explained. He said that they wanted me to go directly to their temple, so then they would take the credit that they had sent me to preach all over the world. If they were sincere, they would have come and met me at the airport and requested me also to visit their temple. But they sat in their temple and didn't come to get me. This is very intricate. What this means, it would appear that I was going and reporting back to them. And then they would publish that they had sent me and now I was going back to them. Therefore I will not go there. You go there and accept their prasad and bring here, we will take some. So this is my first introduction to intricacies of Indian sadhu etiquette and different, higher level kind of spiritual intrigues. Being very simple. I once wrote Srila Prabhupada that what should we do when we meet a sannyasi? When I'm in India, there'll be so many sannyasis. What should I do? I just want to do the proper thing, the proper etiquette. And it's very simple. And he wrote back, you should bow down. Even if he's a Mayavadi, yes, no harm. Just don't listen to them. But this was pretty high level intrigue. But anyway, Prabhupada guided us through. And then, that night, of course being just two brahmacharis together in India, Chutananda, Das and myself, sometimes in India, taking sannyas and preaching, these things are very prominent. In the West, there's other things which are more prominent. But there, because of the environment, it's a very good field for preaching, and people are more receptive from the renounced order of life. So we were thinking, that sometime possibly Srila Prabhupada would ask us to take sannyas, whether he would or not. What would be his order? Because he had told me once, when my temple president, this was another thing, and anyway, I won't distract you, but I can say that. Once my temple president, that time my temple president was Hansadura Das, and his wife was Himavati. And I was a bhakta in the temple. And Himavati was trying to get all the, not only brahmacharis, but even the bhaktas married. So at that time I was quite determined to be Krishna conscious, and I wasn't 100% sure that being married was actually what I should be doing. I wasn't close to the idea, but at the same time I wasn't, it was being more or less pushed on me. So I was kind of upset. I came in tears to Prabhupada, what should I do? They're trying to pressure me, this wife of the president. And he said, no, you tell that it's my order that you cannot be married. That the system in India is you wait till you're 25 and the Guru decides. And he at the age of 25, he decides which direction that brahmachari should go. So you wait till you're 25 and then I'll decide. Up until then, you hands off. So then I was relieved because I didn't. So then we were thinking, well, maybe Prabhupada asked us, because we knew he said you can get first and second initiation, you have to ask for that, but to get sannyas you had to be asked. So he called the Chutananda Das into his quarters, and it was that time, we were all asleep, it was 10 o'clock, but I was, listening, and I heard Prabhupada shouting at him. At first I thought maybe he's calling him in to get sannyas. I didn't know really what, it didn't sound like he's getting sannyas. And sounded like Prabhupada was very angry. Didn't know what was actually happening. And could hear bits and pieces. Something about a letter, something about Brahmananda, something about God Brothers. Couldn't really pick it all together at that time. I knew for one thing, it didn't seem like he was getting sannyas anyway. So then the next morning, Prabhupada, I think it was the next morning, even that night, he called us in. And that time he explained to us that while Chutananda was in the meantime I heard from other God brothers that there was something happened in New Vrindavan, that some of our sannyasis had gone a little bit crazy. They had been affected by Mayavadi philosophy and so on. And that Prabhupada was very upset. And so then Prabhupada explained that, he said Chutananda is, I don't know if Chutananda was in the room at the time or not. He might have been. That I don't remember. But he explained that he picked up some criticism or something, and he wrote that in a letter to to one of the sannyasis in America, to one of the devotees in America. And as a result of that poison, they became affected and they actually developed the Mayavadi philosophy. And so Prabhupada was actually testing Achyutananda to see if he was really into it, and he said that he's innocent. But he was like a carrier, like a person carries a disease by inadvertently repeating something which was envious. That he actually was a carrier and through him this poison had come and affected those 4 people. Of course Prabhupada corrected everything. So it's pretty much the first 2 days, it was pretty intense. But after that, then it was very nice. We had programs in South Calcutta near Gauria Hut, and in Gauria, Jadavpur, and all over Calcutta. Prabhupada went and did these programs. One program we had this big car. It was a Dodge, 56 Dodge. Was given by a life member that we could drive. I remember Kirtananda Swami used to drive the Dodge in Calcutta. It's a very big car. I mean, in Calcutta it's very crowded, so you drive a big car like that, it's a very good suspension though. And kind of floating. When you go over the bumps, you're floating. It was, forget the name of the group, but it was a very distinguished group who met every 2 weeks. Like Rotary Alliance, but it was not that type of syndicated group. It was a specific one society just for really high class, exclusive citizens of Calcutta, mostly businessmen. And that was held just right near the corner of what's known as Esplanade, which is just the kind of a real hustle and bustle central part of Calcutta, and up on the 2nd floor. So there was a big program, and Prabhupada spoke, and that time he inaugurated life membership in India. He said, we're going to have a program, we have temples all over the world, you can come and stay there. And he inaugurated that you pay 1111 rupees, 1,100, 1. Krishna, God is one. You give 1. So everyone liked that, and about 3-4 people right on the spot, they became life members. And there was a lot of money in those days, 1111 rupees. And I remember that there was actually a struggle who would be first. Because whoever would be first would be the number 1 life member. In fact, even to this day, one of the life members who's number 2, he tried to get it changed that he could be number 1. But when number 1 heard about it, then he became very upset. So then Prabhupada was, very happy to accept their donations, and he issued the first certificates of life membership. And then there was a big feast. And this was the first time, normally, we'd only eat temple prasad, but this time he said no, because they become life members and for preaching. It's all vegetarian, of course. But then he said we can eat their vegetarian feast. And I remember Prabhupada was sitting at the head, and the devotees were on one side, and these people with new life members and other dignitaries are on the other side. And it was a very wonderful gathering. So that was basically the highlights I remember of how the Calcutta preaching started. Then Prabhupada went to Bombay. Later on he came back, and in May 71, he arrived there in August 70, and May 71, that time when Calcutta was the time of what they call the United Front. It was a coalition government of leftist parties. But that time the leftist parties, they weren't very cohesive, and there was a lot of violence. There was that time the Naxal movement of Marxist, Leninist, radical revolutionaries who were on the rampage. And so the scenario in Calcutta was that every day there were 14, 12 murders. They pick out big businessmen, big politicians, all over Eastern India, but especially in Bengal, especially Calcutta area, but even, I think even in Jamshedpur, and spread it, it was very rampant. And where we were living was in North Calcutta, in a very sensitive area. It was Jyotindra Mohan Avenue, near Bidan Street, which is just in the heart of a very crowded area of Calcutta, and in all little alleys and lanes, and in there were very political activists. So on the street at that time, there were sandbags put up by the police, and they would be sitting there with their guns, and they actually just would be holding. When you went by at night, you have to raise your arms and walk by with your hands in the air. And there was right below our window, we often saw that from one side of the road, one group of political gang almost, but political supporters would come, and they'd be carrying little athletic bags filled with bombs. And then from the other side, they'd come and they'd, like a snowball fight, they'd throw the bombs, and that bomb would hit, and you'd see that once people spin off and roll on the ground, the bomb would explode. And then they'd get up and they'd throw one, and see them run, with more bombs the guy would carry, with glasses, like a mad scientist kind of guy. And sometimes they'd get hit, and sometimes then the police would come, usually long after everything was over. But sometimes they come. One time they came and they were chasing a boy into the alley, and we heard gunshots, and we saw him drag out his body completely riddled. So it was like a very dangerous time in Calcutta. At that time, we were trying to preach there. And at that time, Prabhupada called us to the Kumbh Mela in Allahabad. And that's a whole other story, the Kumbh Mela story. That we could discuss that later. But when we went to the Kumbh Mela, then Prabhupada told me that I'm never going to Calcutta until you get, that time we want our own place. I want our own place, that we have our temple. That time we were staying in a half a floor of a apartment building that one gentleman had given us, but he wanted, our own house, a whole floor to ourselves that we could perpetually stay in, at least for some time. So then it was like I had to leave the Kumbh Mela a few days early. Went back to Calcutta, and we found, in the present place where we still are, on Albert Road, we found that place, and one gentleman was going to make it into a hotel office 6 months later. But for right now, he didn't have any need for it, so he can have it free of rent for 6 months. So that was, we said, telegram Prabhupada, and he came by train. So then we arranged to have, in May, a big pandal in downtown Calcutta. So Prabhupada got a letter in the mail, which was, cut out from magazines, the letters, like the, you, may, how they cut out, you see in the movies. We got one of those, several. You leave town now or die. Naxal Salam. Several like that, So then Prabhupada called the police and gave it over. He said, we're not, go on with our program. We won't, they threatened, if you don't stop your pandal program, you'll be killed. Prabhupada said, just go on with it. So we formed the police, had extra guards. While we were doing our pandal program in Calcutta, it was the biggest pandal in India, probably even to date. It was a huge pandal. It was about bigger than a football field, about twice the size of a football field. 300 feet long, about 400 feet long by 300 feet wide. It was huge, and it was completely packed with people. It was right opposite the Indian Museum. We had all kind of very big dignitaries came and spoke. The Deputy Chief Minister, one Mr. Nahar, he spoke. I think just at that time the government changed. But, it was still a very agitated time. It was a very disturbed time. But Prabhupada, he just said, go on with the preaching. We distributed prasad every night, halva, sabji, and puri to thousands and thousands of people. And Prabhupada would come every night, he'd arti, and he'd lecture. And he was very bold in his preaching. So, at that time he sent Tamal Krishna Goswami and Bali Mardan Das to Mayapur to buy the Mayapur land that we had found. Chitananda Das and myself had found. But I was busy with this program, so I stayed in Calcutta. So at that time, there were several things that happened. All day Prabhupada would be sitting in his room and big dignitaries would come. He'd always preach to them how they should help the Krishna conscious movement because they were the religious Indians. They were very, that if the Indian community gave support, then all over the world this would give a strength to the Krishna conscious preaching. I remember that one day this minister, he was the home minister of the government at that time, Tarun Kanti Ghosh, he came to see Srila Prabhupada, and in India it's customary that people try to touch the feet of sadhus. But Prabhupada would sometimes get sick because so many people would touch him and they'd get their karma. He said that if you touch the feet, then they give you the karma, but it's not good for the sadhus because then they have to take that karma. So actually only the disciples should touch the feet. So normally Brahmananda, someone would, Swami, they would stop people from touching Prabhupada's feet. And sometimes they'd be too enthusiastic and Prabhupada would say, up to a point you can stop someone, you can't. You can entreat them, you can request, please don't touch. But, if somebody's really, diving, then, you can't have like a whole battle or something. So, in this case, the minister, he came and he said that, I'm going to touch your feet, Swami. Prabhupada tried to get out of it, and he just, he just grabbed, and then, I forget who was there, Brahmananda Swami or whoever was there, they were ready right then, and the Prabhupada said, all right, he didn't want, minister of the government to get, assaulted or something. So then he went and just put his head right on Prabhupada's feet, and then Prabhupada touched him on the head. Prabhupada said there was some system where you can actually pass back the karma. I don't want to know that technique. But then we were sitting there, and that morning in class, Prabhupada had been saying that how all the devotees, that some of the devotees were being sent by Lord Chaitanya, that they were devotees previously. See, someone would say like that. So this minister, he just came in and he just said, I've seen your devotees chanting and seen them, and my impression is that they were born in Bengal before, but they were devotees before. This is not their first birth. How is it they so quickly they could take all these things up? And then Prabhupada, he turned to us and said, just see, confirmed. Is this what I have been saying to you? He has also said, this is a confirmation. So then, I remember that time then, he had the darshan with the gentleman, and then even again Prabhupada stressed it, just see, this is confirmed what I had said. And then I remember I was standing up, and then I told Prabhupada that, but Prabhupada, how can this be? I'm so fallen. How could it be that I was a devotee before? And then, the Prabhupada, became angry. He said, do not doubt my words. Do not doubt. That is all superficial. Because he became very angry, immediately paid our obeisances. So, every day that you see batches of people, always, sometimes his relatives came, rarely he'd introduce us, especially Pishima, his younger sister and god sister. She'd come. I remember one time she insisted that she wanted to cook for Srila Prabhupada. She made the whole thing. Prabhupada was like, so you have to let her do it. She was a very, very good cook. But she always, made such a big, production out of it. Sometimes she'd prepare preparations with mustard oil. And then Prabhupada always told her, mustard oil is for your body, it's not for eating. The Prabhupada said, mustard oil. She said, no, but mustard oil is very good tasting if you know how to cook with it. So from her cooking, he would take one or two preparations with mustard, although normally it was always with ghee. I said, but not too much, but one preparation is all right. And I remember one time, Prabhupada got a little dysentery, because the water in Calcutta is such that you can get dysentery there sometimes. The sewage is built from the British time. The sewage and water pipes are very close or something. I don't know, but somehow you can get sick there quite easily. So even Prabhupada, maybe from the feasting with the life members, or somehow he had the leela of having dysentery. So he said that today I want to have hot puris and salt. Hot puri. Because dysentery normally you have diarrhea and you never take ghee. He said, no, this is one cure. To take hot puris. It's to be piping hot with salt. Order of the Guru. So they cooked hot puri. I think Pishima herself cooked them the first time. Brought in piping, just steaming puris. Real small, thin, hot puris. He put salt on them and he ate a lot of them. Everybody thought, because normally if you take pakoras or puri something when you have a weak stomach, then forget it. Your liver doesn't, but just by mystic power, the Prabhupada was completely cured. By hot puris and salt. So that was a new one for all the devotees. They never... Yes, I think in Mayapur once I saw somebody try it, Bhavananda Maharaj. Then, is there some prasad to give? Then there was another thing that happened there. One time, we had a lot of learning to do. In India, we had hired, Prabhupada said, well, because nobody knew how to cook, Indian style. So he said we could hire a Brahmin. If he didn't smoke and if he, we could hire a Brahmin. So then we hired a cook, and I forget, at that time, Sodanandan Maharaj or Gargamuni Maharaj, someone else was there. The assistant to the cook was a better chapati roller. He was really great chapati roller. Thin, nice, did puff up, fantastic chapati roller. So let him do the cooking. He was better cook than the Brahmin cook. So then, he was doing the cooking for a few days, for some time. I didn't like it, but I was overwhelmed because at that time my temple had Vibhati Nandan, I had Guru Das, Shyam Sundar, Giriraj, Gargamuni, I had Sodanandan, Guru Kripa, Jamuna, Malati. These were, really strong-willed devotees, to say the least. And so they, somehow or another, they decided that they wanted to have this person cook. And we were on a little austerity program. I was only letting them use a half a kilo of ghee a day, which wasn't making me very popular. At that time, Prabhupada was a pretty tight budget. So Prabhupada came and someone complained to him about the cooking, that they weren't getting enough ghee. So he came out and he saw, what are those? These are the chapatis. Why there's no ghee on them? He said, that's food fit for the ghost. It's really, he said it real heavy, it's food fit for ghost, because chapati without ghee, it's fit for the ghost. Then he said, bring the cook. So when they brought the cook, who is this character? And they said that he's not a Brahmin. Then he said, you're eating not only food fit for the ghost, but it's being cooked by a fifth-class man. So he blasted us. I forget some of the heaviest things I'd ever heard. And because at least the Brahmana has some, normally they would have, even in India, they had some understanding about hygiene or things like that, but a non-Brahmana, a non-Vaishnava, they don't know what they're going to do. They don't have that training, that upbringing to act in a very clean and hygienic way. It's like this Prabhupada was teaching us so many things, even there in Calcutta. One time we have in Calcutta was a big veranda with a marble floor. And I was the president there, but every time my GBC would come, because GBCs are real new then, that was 1971, so Prabhupada just appointed GBCs. They didn't really know exactly what their role was. So he'd come and I wouldn't be doing things the way he'd do them. So then he'd want to do everything right way. But instead of telling me how to do them, he'd be so impatient that he would fire me and he'd take over as president. And then he'd do everything his way. Then Prabhupada would come and say, what are you doing? You're supposed to be the GBC. You're not supposed to manage the temple. Remove him and put me back as the president. Like this, I was removed about 8 times. And every time I was replaced, either by Prabhupada or by the GBC. I remember that the GBC said, I have to have my own room. I have to have my own room to meet people and for preaching, and it's just, it's some... So we didn't have any rooms in the Calcutta temple. It's such a weird design. It's like a very old palatial kind of building, which is anyway divided in half, and just big rooms and high, about 18-foot high ceilings. So there really wasn't any room that we could offer. There was one room for Prabhupada, there was the temple room, there was the veranda, there was the little office, there was only rooms in the whole place. There wasn't any other room. Even the president didn't have a room. Kind of floating. But he insisted on having a room, so he built he got some plywood, and built a little shanty on a little room. Very nice, kind of simple. Little masonite 8-inch plywood, built it up on the veranda with a little door, painted it blue. Real bright blue, like the color of Balabhadra's t-shirt lapel there, and a turquoise bright blue. And that was his little room. Well, that room lasted until Prabhupada came. Said, what is this? This is ruining my veranda. This is ruining my veranda. And why you build? I forget the exact words that why are you building this, shanty, on my veranda? To tear it down immediately. The GBC was crushed. We all told him that, this is kind of strange. It cuts into the veranda. So while Prabhupada was telling that, we had to look serious because otherwise, we didn't want to get But it was real hard. Everybody was covering up. So I was the last of the blue room. There are many little things. Prabhupada one time he said that nobody was spending too much on taxis, everyone should take a tram. And trams cost 10 paisa in India about. At that time 10 paisa went less than a cent. So you could ride anywhere in the city for 10 paisa. But it took forever. It was real slow as compared to a taxi. And you had to, public bus system. But this wasn't even a bus. Buses were fast, but this was tram. You could go by bus, but buses are very crowded. Tram was a little better. So most of the devotees went by tram. 12 paisa, 10 paisa. You go first class was 12 paisa, normal was 10. But if you went 10 paisa, all the seats had these bed bugs. You sit on it and you stand up, your whole rear end would be striped with, just where you sat, and the crack of the seat, the wooden seat, they'd all come out of the cracks and bite. And in first class, they had a little bit of Rexine plastic with some fiber, and a little bit of padding. It was for 2 paisa more, but the bed bugs didn't get through it. So sometimes the devotees would, spend a little extra and go by the tram, first class. So because Prabhupada had said, we took it literally, we did, but then later on it turned out that it cut into the collections, and so in the meantime I was transferred to Mayapur, and the new president got permission from Prabhupada that if the devotees collected more, by going by, if they were able to do more Sankirtan by going by taxi, that was all right. But it shouldn't just be they're going by taxi for the sake of going by taxi, but it should be that due to getting increased productivity. So, one time, actually the time when Prabhupada was going from Calcutta to the Kumbh Mela, then he said in the train sometimes Prabhupada would take, he would always take a box lunch, but sometimes he'd get hungry and the lunch would run out. So sometimes he would send me out and he would take puris cooked on the station, hot puri and sabji. And he said that if you buy, then there's no karma. And if it's cooked in ghee, or cooked, deep fried, then the transference of the bad mentality doesn't go so much. He said in traveling, he quoted some Sanskrit verse that in traveling it's all right, in emergency. Although later, when we were more together and we cooked a bigger lunch, then he wouldn't do that. Or he would never do it. He didn't do it in the airplanes much either. Or I don't think at all. But sometimes, one time anyway, because we weren't very together at that time, only a few devotees. And apparently got hungry, so well anyway. You can get. I remember I went out on the station and I was trying to procure those things and buy some oranges, and somehow I didn't notice that the train was taking off. I looked, and there the train was, was going off. And I started running, because, we missed the train, and, there's nothing you can do. And I missed Prabhupada's car, and by that time the train was going real fast, and I didn't know how to get it. So one conductor reached down and pulled me up. And it was in the AC first class compartment, all air conditioned. Prabhupada wouldn't go in the air conditioned class. He used to go in the first class. In those days, first class was much better than it is today. But then somehow at the next stop I got down and ran up and met Srila Prabhupada and gave him the prashana. He was very nonchalant about it. And I remember they were sitting there, and because it was, we didn't have proper plates or any tray or anything, so then, because it was situated in one hand, he had a banana in the other hand, so this time, I never see this, eating with two hands, but here on the train, just, due to sheer logistics, he was taking with, 2 hands, and that time Prabhupada was, somehow the discussion came about milk. I don't know if I should mention the name of who said this. Actually, so then Tamal Krishna Das Adhikari at that time, he was asking Prabhupada that in India there's so many kinds of milk. Here they have buffalo, cow, but then buffalo, goat, just like so many. I mean, you don't see, in the West you have buffalo, maybe some goat, but it's like so many. And somehow he said, do dogs give milk? Something like that. And Prabhupada was, Prabhupada just that's not milk! That's not milk! And he said that apart from cow, buffalo and goat, nothing else is not milk. It was very intimate. I mean, we were just, being in the same compartment with Srila Prabhupada, going to Allahabad. Of course, no one would sleep above him, so we had purchased him 2 berths. But then opposite there'd be 2 people, and then in the room next. But when we were going, he'd bring everyone in, so we'd be sitting across, either down on the ground or on the seat across, and he'd be sitting up on one seat, cross-legged. We put a cloth there. So it was a very intimate opportunity. And I can remember a lot of very wonderful instructions he gave them. Because it's so intimate, therefore, you could, I would normally never ask something like that. It's so intimate. And it was just right by his lotus feet. So, you tend to just, not think what you're saying before you say it. But normally in another more formal situation that would never happen. But, just kind of like making. But then as soon as we say something that wasn't, on, then of course immediately Prabhupada would assert his absolute transcendental position. The one thing happened in Calcutta that one day we were sitting in his room. I think that in his room he'd always have it completely white. There'd be mattresses on the floor and he'd cover them with white sheets. And he had big bolster pillows on the seat and a nice, not so opulent, but a nice desk with a glass cover. And he'd be sitting there and everything would be white, the room would be white, all covered with clean sheets which were changed every day. One speck on them would be changed. It always kept immaculately clean. And incense burning. And there were 2, 3 of us sitting, I think maybe that time, I forget exactly who was there. I was sitting right in front of Srila Prabhupada. And there were about 3 other devotees at that time. And he started just to tell this story. He said that in Bengal there was one Gopal Bhar, who was the court barber. And he was a very... said there's a story, and he said, how did it come? That there's a very high pressure in the king's court. The king was the judge, he was administrator, everything was on his shoulders. So sometimes between sessions, they need a little relief, comical relief or humorous relief, or so nobody could play off the king. Everyone had to, my lord. But the barber, or like a barber, or kind of like, I guess in a Western context you might say was a court jester. Prabhupada never exactly explained what he was, but he was the one person, courtier in the court, who had the right that he could spoof with the king. That was his unique position. But similarly, the king would always treat all his other ministers with great respect. Would never treat them lightly. But the king could also, spoof with this guy. So one day, the king came in, this Gopal Bhar came in, Prabhupada explained, just I gave a little background. And Prabhupada just started explaining this, Gopal Bhar came in, the king said, Gopal, you are an ass. Sitting there listening. Then Prabhupada explains that Gopal said, no, there's a difference between me and an ass. The king said, Gopal, you are an ass. No, Your Majesty, there's a difference between me and an ass. Oh Gopal, there's a difference between you and an ass? Yes. What is that difference? Then he was standing about 6 foot from the king. He measured off the distance from the king and he said, 6 feet. And Prabhupada was laughing. This is the first time we'd ever seen Prabhupada crack a joke. We were little, we didn't know whether to... Because Prabhupada was laughing, so we were laughing, but we were a little bit afraid, we didn't want to do the wrong thing also. Actually, he just suddenly told it. Then he explained how the king has this wave, and he said that... he said actually, even in the humor, even in the Vedic humor, there's messages. Then he just proceeded to tell more Gopal Bhar stories. This is famous, he said, there's a big book in Bengal. The histories of this king, Krishna Chandra, who was Krishna Nagar, near Mayapur, is named after Krishna Chandra. And his famous court advisor is Gopal Bhar. So, he told the story that one day, which one did Prabhupada tell first? Prabhupada told the story of, he said that one day, the king had a new son, heir to the throne. The whole kingdom was rejoicing. So, at that time, the king was father, heir, prince, very, very joyful occasion. So then Gopal just happened to show up at that time. They came and said, Gopal, this joyous occasion of the birth of, the crown prince, what do you have to say? Tell me at this moment, tell me, how are you feeling? And then Gopal Bhar said, to be sincere, I'm feeling very happy after passing school. Oh, Gopal! You're so gross! How could you say so? And the king became thoroughly disgusted. Just, here's the sake of the Brahmins are doing food, it's a big thing, and then just suddenly, the grossest thing, So after that, but Gopal said, don't be angry, you asked me to tell you how I was feeling, I'm just telling you the truth. Gopal said, out of taste, you're crude, you have no couth, So after that, the king he was very cold relationship with Gopal. He became very much, very dangerous this courtier relationship, very sensitive. So the king was very displeased with. After that, it was a cold relationship, but just formally. He took it very personally. So then, after some time, the Prabhupada explained that one day, Gopal, after many months, was taking him on a boat ride. and I was rowing the boat, and the king said that Gopal, pull over. And I have to nature call. And he started to say, no, this is not a good place. Thieves and things congregate here. It's a bad place. He kept on rowing. He said, a little further. Then I wait a while, and the king said, no, Gopal, you pull over right away. He said, no, I can't. It's a very rough area here. It's not a good place. Thorns and things. And the king said, no, I want you to pull over here right away. He said, just a little further, there's a better place there, Immediately, pull over. Cannot wait any longer. The king was just really getting it. So then Gopal pulled over, and the king jumped out and, did his business, nature call. And then when he came back after washing everything, came back, and then Gopal said that, how do you feel? He said, I feel relieved. And I said, remember that day when your crown prince was born? Such a thing happened to me, and just at that moment you asked me how I was feeling. And so I just told you, now do you understand? The king then said, Gopal. So then when Prabhupada was laughing, but that was too much for us. We didn't know what to say. We just said, we tried to laugh, but it was like, we didn't know, because the relationship with Prabhupada was so formal that you didn't know, this was really an intimate joke, and the punchline was not the normal kind you get in the West. So, but Prabhupada didn't stump it. He said, no, actually there's many cultural things to learn from these stories. What is the position of the king? And he told another story. He said that one time Gopal was making a new house. And according to the Vedic culture, when you make a new house, it's become completely clean. No one should pass stool there. And if they do, then they can't, because you have to do pujas and house grihe pravesham, then you can use the house. The Prabhupada was trying to explain that, this is a humor, this is just a normal humor, it doesn't get any worse than this. But actually, even in the humor, the whole, it's all based upon the subtle relationships in the culture of the Vedas. So here, he's building his house, he's going to have his puja as soon as it's completed. So the king offers in the court that Gopal is building a new house. If anybody can go there and defile his house, can go there and pass nature call, stool in his house, I'll give 1,000 silver coins. So then one courtier said, I'll do it. Took the challenge. So then he made a plan, what to do. So one day Gopal was there supervising his house construction, seeing everything's going on. Because the house, though he'd see that, he wouldn't want he'd just be there, seeing that everything was done properly. They had Brahmins do the foundation, stone setting, people building according to the Artha Shastra, everything. Even for an ordinary house, they're very careful. So suddenly this man came up and said, Gopal! There's an extreme emergency. I have to immediately answer a nature call. Please allow me to use your new bathroom. Gopal thought, this is very strange. Why he wants to use my new bathroom? Yes, it's all right. And Prabhupada explained. Then so the person went and he positioned himself in the bathroom, and he wanted to close the door. He said, Gopal, what are you doing standing there with that big stick? Why don't you let me close the door? He says, no, you can pass through. but if you pass one drop of urine, I'm going to beat your head in and kill you. So then they said, Gopal, you win. And he ran off, you know. That was the final, that was really too much for us. But indirectly, we were taught that how actually this was teaching Vedic culture. I mean, even in the humor that they had to do puja, this was where kings, you know, this was their light side of their day. They would playing games, but even the games were based on this whole Vedic culture. Even it was, intertwined. And you can't, just like they say, Krishna, it's so much intertwined that even if somebody gets a little bit, they call this tamasa. Joking is like tamagun. These aren't like the spiritual instructions or something, but even though these are so kind of crude or whatever, but at the same time, it's like within it, the whole cultural values are completely intertwined. And those were the stories that Prabhupada told us. Of course, other places we told, there are other different stories. It was actually just a couple of devotees were there, just like a light moment. Prabhupada opened up and just told us a little bit of what the local humor was like. That way Prabhupada was trying to show that, alright, even, in the humor, in the humor that has been handed down, he said this is taught in all the high schools. These stories, it's like a part of the history of Bengal. That even within the humor there's this cultural connection. There's one more story how. You want to hear one more Gopal Bar story? Gopal Bar was really smart. One day the king was going on procession, and with his courtiers and everyone, and then he saw that there was a Brahmana who was wearing a shaligam shila around his neck in a silk bag. And then the Brahmana walked off to the side of the road, and just with a shaligam shila around his neck, he evacuated. So the king said, arrest him. Had him arrested. Had him brought to the court and said, what type of Brahman are you? You're carrying a shaligam shila. And then you can do such a thing. You don't know that's Narayan? It's God? How can you, go to the bathroom, wearing a shaligam shila? You're not a Brahmana. What do you have to say for yourself? You're just shaking. So he said that at sundown, you'll be beheaded. If a Brahmins like you commit offense to Narayan in our kingdom, then our whole kingdom will be destroyed by the offense. So you're not a Brahmana, therefore for committing this offense you should give your life. The Brahmana was completely petrified. You could have hung it up or something. Why? How can you just wear it? And then Gopal said, but Your Majesty, he's just a carrier of the Lord. He's just a carrier of the shaligam. The king had just sentenced him to death. Suddenly Gopal interjects, he's just a carrier, so he just, There wasn't a time, one of Gopal's jokes or something. What do you mean, Gopal? What do you mean he's just a carrier? Don't butt in now. This is a serious business. No, but Your Majesty, he's just a carrier. So, the king, he knew that something was up. He says, what do you mean? What do you mean he was just a carrier? He was carrying the shaligam shila while he passed through. Could there be a greater offense? But Your Majesty, he was just a carrier. Explain yourself. What do you mean he's just a carrier? And he said, well, my lord, your horse was carrying you. When your horse has stool, did you take a bath? Did you feel contaminated? Release him! Never do this again. Gopal, you did it again. So, I gave a different angle at, Vedic culture, that there were, very personal relations and very personal things, and, Of course, these are not the pure devotee. I mean, these are, not pure devotees. So these are not the great. This is a king, and about 500 years ago, 400 years ago, just after the time of Lord Chaitanya, before the British came, during the Mughal period. But even then, just only about 300 years ago, Vedic culture was so strong. And these are the basic ones that we heard from Prabhupada. I became so curious that actually I bought the book. But I can go on to a lot. Prabhupada just gave us a sample, just to show that there was another aspect, of maybe a little lighter side, but that even the lighter side, that it had its roots in the Vedic culture, and similarly, that he told us some of the unusual way that how, like, you could see how Vedic culture, how 5,000 years ago there was complete total Vedic culture, and how over the time, gradually got watered down, and how it kind of intermingled with Maya. As time went on, it came with, unusual combinations. Some of them which are completely, totally mind-boggling. Prabhupada would point out and show that how you could still see certain remnants of the Vedic culture, trained how to pick out where you could see the roots in the Vedic culture, in the humor or in the lifestyle or in the history of that modern and near modern recent time. Prabhupada slapped his knee, was laughing. He told a joke. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Out of these Gopal Bar stories, the punchline is it's more like a situation which is very cryptic, very humorous, and then surprise ending. And then the surprise ending is humorous. Any questions? It's too late for us a long time.
You said before when you invited the Prabhupada and parents, that household of your equal came up, a special sponsor?
No, not. Yeah, well, it's like in the family tree.
Right.
Cousin brother.
So, but my what he was saying that he didn't visit Prabhupada because he had taken initiation from that situation before Prabhupada. But now he was giving instruction, he was a disciple. So why did he take his instruction or advice?
Well, it was obviously political.
It seems like it's contradictory.
It was also Greek, I mean, that's why in Lord Chaitanya's time this wasn't there. This was the whole thing that for a long time we kind of kept clear from the other mission. That's warmed up a lot now. I mean, Prabhupada brought us closer together, but it's still, formal, because Prabhupada, was actually someone who may have taken sannyas later, but he was very close to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur often, some occasion praised Prabhupada and gave him very specific private instructions. But apparently his success in preaching all over the world, the response it should have brought was complete cooperation in everything, and Prabhupada comments on this fact in his Chaitanya Charitamrita purport, especially in the Madhya 1. You get the Madhya 1. Going to Ramkeli, isn't that Madhya 1? Madhya 1. Maybe it's Madhya 2. Well, Lord Chaitanya meets Rupa Goswami in Ramkeli. He's going to Vrindavan. That's what I had the first one, at Madhya 1. Look over it. Birth after birth you have been my eternal servants. I am sure that Krishna will deliver you very soon. The Lord then placed his two hands in the heads of both of them, and in return they immediately placed the lotus feet of the Lord on their heads. After this the Lord embraced both of them and requested all of the devotees present to be merciful upon them and deliver them. When all of the devotees saw the mercy of the Lord upon the two brothers, they were very gladdened, and they began to chant the holy name of the Lord, Hari Hari. Purport. Sri Narottam Das Thakur says, Sarya Vaishnava Seva Nishtar Payat Shikeba. Unless one serves a Vaishnava, he cannot be delivered. The spiritual master initiates the disciple to deliver him, and if the disciple executes the order of the spiritual master and does not offend other Vaishnavas, his path is clear. Consequently, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu requested all the Vaishnavas present to show mercy toward the two brothers, Rupa and Sanatana, who had just been initiated by the Lord. When a Vaishnava sees that another Vaishnava is the recipient of the Lord's mercy, he becomes very happy. Vaishnavas are not envious. If a Vaishnava by the mercy of the Lord is empowered by him to distribute the Lord's holy name all over the world, other Vaishnavas become very joyful. That is, if they are truly Vaishnavas. One who is envious of the success of a Vaishnava is certainly not a Vaishnava himself, but an ordinary mundane man. Envy and jealousy are manifested by mundane people, not by Vaishnavas. Why should a Vaishnava be envious of another Vaishnava who is successful in spreading the holy name of the Lord? An actual Vaishnava is very pleased to accept another Vaishnava who is bestowing the Lord's mercy. A mundane person addressed of a Vaishnava should not be respected, but rejected. This is enjoined in the Shastras, Upeksha. The word Upeksha means neglect. One should neglect an envious person. A preacher's duty is to love the Supreme Personality of Godhead, make friendships with the Vaishnavas, show mercy to the innocent, and reject or neglect those who are envious or jealous. There are many jealous people in the dress of Vaishnavas in this Krishna consciousness movement, and they should be completely neglected. There is no need to serve a jealous person who is in the dress of a Vaishnava. When Narottam Godhead, make friendships with the Vaishnavas, show mercy to the innocent, and reject or neglect those who are envious or jealous. There are many jealous people in the dress of Vaishnavas in this Krishna consciousness movement, and they should be completely neglected. There is no need to serve a jealous person who is in the dress of a Vaishnava. When Narottam Das Thakur says, Sarya Vaishnava Seva Nistar Payat Sikeba, he is indicating an actual Vaishnava, not an envious or jealous person in the dress of a Vaishnava. So when Prabhupada wrote these purports, it was not only for the ISKCON Krishna Conscious movement, but for the other Krishna Conscious movement as well. I mean, other followers of Lord Chaitanya. We don't have to kindly forgive our rudeness in repeating those Gopal Bhair stories publicly, more for the sake of history. If anyone felt embarrassed, then they should cover their ears.